Hey guys, my absolute favorite time of year. Yeah, first ice is great, the fall is great, but there's no better time than when you first pull out your boat for the first time of the year. I got one more week to wait, I think, before the new land arrives, but everyone's excited. Guys, you can see guys pulling their boats out of storage, shining things up, getting stuff going. What starts the season around here? Crappie fishing. I love crappie fishing. I've done it every year since I really started. I really pounded it really hard. I've caught some really nice fish over the years. Caught the elusive 15-incher, which I doubted for years. I've always heard these mythical creatures, 15-inch crappies, but I have put a couple of those over the gunnels in the last few years. They do exist, and that's a nice fish, really nice fish. So I'm always puzzled. Like now that Facebook's really opening a lot of people's eyes to fishing in different areas, and I always wonder why I see, like in the Kawarthas, you guys have a nice out crappie bite. Up here, we don't. It doesn't exist. You know, guys push the season, and you know, as soon as the ice is out, we go out and try and fish in traditional crappie areas. I've done it for years. I've learned that it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen like it does for you guys down there. My best crappie fishing is walleyes open, right? So we're talking second week of May, temperature hits 60 degrees, and then it's really game on. A lot of guys will ask me around here, you know, if you're trying a new lake, when do you go? I said, well, I won't go and try a new lake because I've been down this road and it's painful that you know there's crappie in the lake, but you can't find them. And you can't find them, and you can't find them. And all of a sudden the water hits 58, 60 degrees, and every spot that you fished before now has crappies in it. And it's just, I don't know why it happens down there and it doesn't happen here. It's a fact. It does not happen here. Like, you won't see anybody from up this way catching crappies like they are down Kawarthas, and even Jeremy Foote posted some great fish. And I'm assuming he's fishing near Peterborough from Madoc area. That's only like 2 hours southwest of here. It's not even south. It's southwest of here. But they're on them. Good for you guys. Kind of jealous, truthfully. So I'm always asked kind of what my setups are. And crappie fishing is more about finding the fish than it is technique. If you found the fish, more often than not, they're ready to eat. They're there to eat. And you can get them to eat pretty easily. So I run two main setups. I run a setup without a float, which is my personal favorite. All my buddies kind of joke around about, you know, if we're bass fishing or whatever, I'll drift a tube. I'll drift almost dead stick a tube for bass and just cast it out and kind of slowly work it back. Well, I do the same thing with crappies. Yeah, the float's fun, and some days you need the float. Some days are that kind of get distance away from the boat, you have to have a float so you can really bomb it. But for actually kicking around and just kind of pitching around, and even sight fishing, you know, once the water hits 60, you're up in the shallows, you can sight fish these fish often in that depth of water. So I prefer this type of setup. So this is actually a G Loomis Trout Series rod. It's a 792 6.7 ultralight. Awesome stick. This stick has caught so many fish for me, I can't even tell you. And crappie always hit on the upswing. When a crappie hits the tube jig on this, and you'll notice my tube jig is a little bit bigger than what you traditionally might use. I'll get to that in a sec, but you feel like they punch you in the shoulder with this rod. You feel every little pop, the line twitch, and I just use monofilament. Fluorocarbon's a pain in the ass, especially with light line. So I just stick, 6 or 4 pound mono. Mainly 6. I don't get down to 4 because you don't need to. And odds are you're going to run into pike and bass while crappie fishing. So rather than breaking stuff off in fish's face, I'll bump it up to 6. I tried 4 in the past, but it just wasn't worth it. I felt like I was losing stuff all the time. So I bumped to 6, and it doesn't really change much. But yeah, and that rod is phenomenal. Trout Series rod. I use 1000 Series reels. That's a Saros on there. And like I said, the tube jigs that I use, for 2 reasons. I'm looking for bigger crappies, but what it does is it really avoids those little pesky bluegills. Now, they will still nip at the tail and take the tails off your tube, but I prefer, and actually it's a 2-inch tube jig, so you can see that sucker there. So any fishing application using plastics, your hook has to match the size of your plastic. So you see that's actually a pretty good sized hook in there for that size of plastic. That's a 2-inch tube jig, right? A lot of guys will use a 1-inch or a 1-inch grub or whatever. Been there, done that. I want the biggest fish that I can catch out of the school, and trust me, 8-inchers eat that thing too. If you open the mouth of a crappie, it can eat a 4-inch bait, no problem at all. So I'll bump it up a bit just to get away from those pesky little bluegills and sometimes perch that'll be nipping at the tails and stuff. Sometimes they'll avoid this, sometimes they just come up and choke the whole thing. But I still think it catches a bigger fish with a little bit bigger presentation, but make sure you match that jig head and the hook size to the size of your tube jig. Very important, so you actually have some hook hanging out of the actual tube jig to stick it in his face. So that's my one setup that I use more often than not. I'm usually float free if I can be, just because I prefer to fish that way. My float setup, and what I have most clients using when we're out guiding is a 7-foot one-piece Claris with a 1000 series reel on it. 7-footer mainly because I want you to be able to launch the cast as far as you can cast. Some days I'll spot lock off a school of fish or off a little weed bed or off a pile of cabbage that I know they're sitting in, and I'll stay as far off as I can not to spook them and make you make the longest cast on top of that. So again, bigger tube jig. There's a pattern to what I'm telling you here, but bigger tube jig, always with a slip sinker, or not a slip sinker, a slip float. So my bead's up top, just a little cheapy, nothing too technical here. I prefer these floats just because they're nice, lightweight, and stealthy underwater, so it's black underwater. One of the funniest stories ever was a buddy of ours was struggling catching crappies. He went out on the Otter River, he couldn't catch crappies, and despite us telling him that it wasn't the best time of year for him to try and catch them, he kept trying and trying. Finally, we said to him, "Well, what color is your float?" He said, "Well, my float's yellow." Dude, you have to use an orange float. They only eat it when you use an orange float. It doesn't matter what color of float you use. We got them. So I think he went and bought orange floats. But so my float comes down a bead. You can see a little bead to a swivel. So I use a little a little steel head swivel above everything here. And you'll see these little weights here. I'll talk about them in a sec. But if you're using tube jigs, odds are things are twisting a lot. So I put that little connector swivel on there. My bead comes down and sits on top of it. So when you go to cast, this is all you're casting. You know, your sinker, your stop is up higher. So that's the only distance you need to cast. That's the length of what you would have off the end of your rod. So you probably reel up to about there and bomb it out. But this thing here, so as ugly as that may look, 3 split shot. So what that does is the second that this hits the water, because I'm only using a 16th or a 32nd ounce tube jig head in here, so it's very light. So if I had to wait for this to sink down before this has to sink slowly all the way down to actually get my float to go all the way up to the top, I'd be waiting probably, I don't know, 5, 6, 7, 8 seconds before my float would actually settle. And oftentimes the fish has already eaten it on the drop, and my float's not even settled to the top of the peg yet, and I already have a fish on it. I want this float to settle as fast as I can get it to settle, and even then it's okay because I'm fishing right away. So what happens right away is, so this lands, this sends it up, and this float, because this is sinking so fast because of the weight, that this is on the stop in a second. Boom. So oftentimes what happens is this will go flying up. This is sinking so fast that a fish will pick the tube jig up on the drop. This will hit the peg and just keep going underwater. So if I had to wait all that time for this little light jig to sink, it probably wouldn't be ideal. This is kick-ass for me. I think I probably cast 2 to 3 times more than someone in the boat beside me that doesn't have that weight on there to actually settle your float ahead of time. So that's my setups. Nothing overly technical, but that little, a couple little tips here that might help you catch a few more fish this year. It's go time. When the boat comes, that'll be what I'm doing the first week. That's what I'm going to try and do. I love it, and it's a lot of fun. Get your kids out, and I won't give you any spots, but I can tell you every lake pretty much around our area, from Kingston all the way through the Rita system, the Rita River, the Otter River, all have crappies, all have nice crappies. Check the boats out, see where guys are fishing. It's not rocket science. Once you find them, you're going to catch a lot of them. So keep some. They're delicious. My motto in the boat is we don't keep anything over 11 inches. That's what we do. 11 and up goes home. 10 inches are the perfect size fillet for a fish fry. Doesn't have that big thick piece. And if you find out the age of some of these fish, Terry Out of Doors had an article not too long ago that a 14-inch fish in Ontario is between 12 and 15 years old. Which blows my mind because I can't believe that they haven't been caught and kept in that amount of time. But that's how old these fish are. So let's let those bigger ones go. Keep the 10s, 11s, maybe. 9s and 10s are what I like to keep. And they're easy to clean and they're delicious. So get out there, do some crappie fishing. I do have a few open dates in May. Not a lot, but a few if you wanted to get out and try it. And just fire me an email and we'll see if we can get you out. So thanks till then. We'll catch you later.